Hi everyone, welcome to Science on Trial. We are going to be talking about the 144,000 mass extinction event related to mosquitoes. There will be 12 groups of 12,000 mosquitoes involved in this particular mass extinction event, which will spread to more mosquitoes until it actually creates this mass extinction. We're going to talk about the event. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's taking place, how it's taking place, and the implications for it. The mass extinction event involves mosquitoes, and so therefore many people will think that mosquitoes are nothing more than menaces to society. The question, however, is that true? Is that the only purpose that mosquitoes serve, is being a menace? And so you have these individuals and groups of individuals who are involved in the science world who like to play God. And so it has been determined that the mosquitoes are a menace to society. The question, however, is whether the entities that seek this mass extinction event, whether they are in fact the menaces to society and ergo actual menaces to creation. And so you see Thanos on the screen because Thanos had all sorts of fantasies about mass extinction. And then you see the Sith also involved in these mass extinction types of dynamics. And so we're going to look at this mass extinction event that has quite a bit of biblical symbolism in it for whatever reason. So you have this event with 144,000 mosquitoes. Yes, someone sat around counting out 144,000 mosquitoes. And so you have 12 groups of 12,000 mosquitoes that are participating in this mass extinction event. Here we're going to talk about the definition, the understanding of a mass extinction event. You see that this is coming from the Future of the World's Climate. This is Science Direct. And it's a discussion about what mass extinction is all about. Now you'll see that this is also tied into the idea of climate issues. And what's noteworthy about climate discussions is that those individuals who are most involved in the climate discussions and they're up in arms about the climate, those entities are usually the ones that were involved in bringing about the climate problems in the first place. And so therefore you have this sort of diffusion of responsibility after bringing on the problems and wanting to sort of spread the responsibility out with other people. And in this instance, you see mosquitoes are going to take a hit here. And so a mass extinction event is basically an event where any substantial increase in the amount of extinction, we're talking about lineage termination. Okay, so this is lineage termination, terminating an actual lineage that is suffered by more than one geographically widespread higher taxon during a relatively short interval of geologic time. And so during a very short period of time, this decline takes place. And so when you look at what's getting ready to happen, what's actually happening right now with these mosquitoes, you can see that it's going to be a very short period of time, even though the impact is said to go on until the 10th generation. And this is just to point out there are lots of discussions about changing the environment in order to make things more sustainable. However, what is taking place is making things less sustainable. And so the more that you fight with nature, the more that nature will likely fight back. And coming up with all of these mass extinction events, what you have is a situation that ultimately is not going to be sustainable. But of course, if you are Thanos, that is your ultimate goal. You don't want things sustaining. You don't want things thriving. You want mass extinction. And so the direction that things are going in that is exactly where things are going. So when you start these mass extinctions with one entity that someone has determined is a pest, you just never know what is going to be the next entity that is understood as a pest. And when you do this, you upset the delicate balance of nature, because mosquitoes actually do serve a purpose. You also have had historically where people groups have been extinguished. And again, you upset the balance of nature. The direction that we are going in, however, at this point in time, uh, positions the earth for total extinction. And so you just can't continue to extinguish things that are uncomfortable or inconvenient just so that you can create Thanos. This world that feels very comfortable for one entity or one group of entities, but very uncomfortable and non-sustainable for other entities. And we're not just talking about human beings. We're not just talking about insects. We are talking about the entire earth. And we are talking about these megalomaniac dynamics. We are talking about these God complex dynamics again. And so, if you are familiar with Thanos, you know that his entire objective was he wanted to reduce the population and then basically sit on his porch and watch the sunset. Yes, it sounds ridiculous, but when individuals are bored and they don't really have a purpose, these are the types of things that they come up with in terms of what makes sense to them. And for those who are not familiar with Thanatos, in ancient Greek mythology, Thanatos was the personification of death, basically. And so he was related to the goddess of the night and also the brother known as Hypnos, or the god of sleep. And this is an article from back in 2018, prior to this whole thing fully taking off. And it indicates that the Gates Foundation and Oxitec, they fight malaria with genetically modified mosquitoes. That's the purpose. And so it says the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has partnered with Oxitec for the development of a new strain of genetically modified mosquitoes that can help reduce the spread of malaria in America, of all places. And so there again is this odd focus on America. There is an obsession with the land known as America. And so it would be really interesting to one day find out what that obsession is all about. Okay, so it indicates this very unusual way of dealing with these mosquitoes. And so Oxitex has come up with this self-limiting technology that selects against female mosquitoes. And the way this is structured is that the females of the offspring of the genetically modified males will die before they reach adulthood. And so what you have is a dynamic where basically the fathers are producing females that will die. They are not going to be producing females that will survive. And so this is the design of this particular project. And here you have the narrative is that this is to control vector-borne diseases, basically. And so mosquitoes spread parasites, they spread disease. And so therefore the idea is to control or get rid of these mosquitoes that go around biting people and spreading disease. And here you have another article. This is in International Business Times, and it is entitled Designed to Die, Florida releasing thousands of genetically modified mosquitoes to combat basically disease-carrying mosquitoes. And then you see the indication there that this is in conjunction with UK-based Oxitec, and they will be releasing 144,000 non-biting Egyptian mosquitoes. 12,000 male mosquitoes will be released in various locations. And so you've got these clusters of 12,000 male mosquitoes that will be released, in order for them to mate with the female mosquitoes in the wild. And here it says that there has been an assessment that the field testing of the insects would have no significant impact on the environment. Now, it's unclear about what was tested in terms of the environment, because when you are talking about mosquitoes that can fly all over the place, it's not clear what the impact on the environment may or may not be. And it's unclear about how widespread this dynamic is going to be. And without testing all of the elements of the environment, it would be impossible to know the actual impact on the environment. This is an additional discussion from Newsweek, and it's entitled "Nearly 150,000 Gene-Hacked Mosquitoes to be Unleashed in Florida." This is from April. And then in speaking to Newsweek, the spokesperson for Oxitec indicated, in terms of clarifying this whole thing, we are releasing 12,000 per week for 12 weeks, which equates to a total of 144,000. And here's additional information related to the economics of the situation. And it indicates genetically modified mosquito startup raises $6.8 million in venture capital. And here you see this organization in Britain was very, very concerned about the issue of malaria in Florida and the Americas, and came up with the bright idea to release these genetically modified mosquitoes after raising $6.8 million in venture capital. And it's noted this is one of the world's most controversial startups, even though everyone applauds its mission of reducing instances of mosquito-borne diseases. There is still some concern. And the concern is about that upsetting the balance and not knowing the impact of tweaking the genetics of these mosquitoes. It gets more interesting. Apparently, Oxitec has released more than 1 billion bugs, including Brazil and the Cayman Islands. It's unclear about why Oxitec has such an interest in the Americas. However, that is what is going on. There are many other places that probably have a bigger mosquito problem than in these particular areas, or a bigger malaria problem than in these particular areas. And then the bottom line is indicated at the bottom. So Oxitec mosquitoes are all males, and they carry what's known as a self-limiting gene that is released when they breed. And this results in a generation that dies before adulthood. So ultimately, what you have are male mosquitoes that are only producing male mosquitoes. And so there will be no female mosquitoes for the male mosquitoes to mate with. And when this takes place, then that particular lineage dies out. And so just think about puberty. So the little girl mosquitoes that the fathers produce will not make it to puberty. They will die before they reach puberty. And so it indicates here that locals, not in Britain, locals in the Americas are concerned about the wider impact on the ecosystem. And this is another discussion coming out of the scientists. It indicates that the first U.S. field test of genetically modified mosquitoes begins in Florida. There were years of pushback. However, Oxitec was able to overcome this pushback, and that these mosquitoes that are released in the Florida Keys are structured to reduce the population numbers overall. This goes into a little bit more detail about the Oxitec mosquitoes. It indicates the modified mosquitoes are all male. They carry a gene that makes female mosquitoes dependent on some sort of antibiotic that is actually not available in the animal's environment, thereby killing all of the male's female offspring. And it indicates that the modified males can spread the female killing insert throughout the population. And so they are indicating that instead of normal pesticide efforts to kill specific mosquitoes, this will carry on throughout time. And so this will replace pesticides in terms of control efforts. And you had residents trying to stop this whole process and were continuing to seek legal action. But again, there was an overcoming of this particular hesitancy. So you also have here that they have released, again, over 1 billion mosquitoes over the years. They indicate there is no potential for risk to the environment or to humans. Again, this is coming from the individuals who stand to make the profit from this situation. It's important to remember when you're talking about corporations also, sometimes people think that corporations have a responsibility to think about the impact that their actions have on the environment. However, the only real mandate for a corporation is to turn a profit for the shareholders, essentially. And so there is no unwritten or written obligation to look out for the environment or to do that which is in the best interest of humanity. And this is another article coming out of Science and Society, and it's talking about agricultural pest control with the CRISPR-based gene drive, and that there is significant public debate about this. And so this CRISPR is basically gene editing, either adding or taking away genetic material. And it talks about how this works here, and you translate this to the mosquitoes. And so with this construct of this editing dynamic, you have a situation where you can have a copy and paste dynamic, almost like a computer program, with respect to the genetic material. And so this is what is taking place also with the mosquitoes. And you can also, with this process, which is going to be going on with the mosquitoes, you can just release a few of these mosquitoes into a population and then completely invade the genetic material of the entire lineage at some point. And so you see this, it's almost like when you have these people going around in these conquest situations where you have basic genetic annihilation of certain members of a population. And so in many instances, of course, you have these dynamics where you have a male mass extinction event, and then the conquering males come in and replace the genetic material. So it's a different way of looking at this editing dynamic, but that's basically what is going on. And so it's a change of the actual material, a change of the makeup of that particular population. And in this particular instance, we're talking about these mosquitoes. And this is really deep. What's interesting is that you've got scientists actually sitting around concocting these things, that this is interesting to them. And so again, this comes back to that whole God complex thing. And the God complex is not just related to scientists. You have many individuals who are obsessed with the idea of being God or being gods or being goddesses. And so they are very obsessed with that whole idea. They want that level of power. They want that level of influence. They want to feel that important. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, not a single one has created a single ocean, a single sun, a single moon. Okay, back to what we're talking about here. And so what you have is, it says the gene drive abolishes a female specific or male specific gene essential for reproduction in this whole process. And when it does this, it can theoretically lead to extinction of the entire species. You could also do this with the females and have them structured to create male offspring that cannot make it through puberty. And you'll have the exact same outcome. It's not going to be any different. But in this instance, with respect to the mosquitoes, the 144,000 mosquitoes made up of 12 groups of 12,000, we have a male specific group that is structured to create this mass extinction of that entire lineage of mosquitoes. And in this article, they are indicating that this type of pest control strategy, this gene drive based pest control, should receive more attention from policymakers. And so they are saying that even though this issue is important, vector-borne diseases such as malaria, you still have to do a cost-benefit analysis. And you need to also make sure that you understand the potential impact on the environment, and that because there is a dearth of regulation right now, that people pretty much have freedom to just run wild with this type of dynamic. And there's also a concern about this ride along dynamic where foreign DNA sequences might insert in places that were not expected or unwanted. And so therefore sort of spreading this whole dynamic, and that this can have an adverse impact on humans. There's also the concern that you may have an ecological impact where you have these new traits that directly impact a target population, but those impacts may not be completely understood. And so you don't necessarily know all of the side effects on the surrounding entities. You don't know all of the impacts on the environment. And so there's this, single point focus of eradicating these mosquitoes without thinking about the impact on the rest of the environment. Now that's an assumption, because it's actually possible that people are thinking about the impact on the rest of the environment, and if they are doing good science, they would know what the impact would be, and they would be anticipating that particular thing. Now the problem is that you may not be able to reverse this. Once it is discovered that there is a problem with this, in terms of eradicating next generations, there may not be any way to actually reverse this. And so again, this is that playing God dynamic yet again. And then at the bottom, you just see that this is emphasized, that it's very difficult to estimate the actual impact on the environment. And with so much concern about the environment, you would think that something like this would be receiving significant attention. And so while we are going through this interesting process that we are going through right now with the current situation, it seems imprudent at this point in time to then release some odd dynamic like this into the environment. And this is another article that was asking the question of whether this is a prudent way to go about agricultural pest control. Again, this process has already been put in place. It's been put in motion. And so therefore you can't just go back and stop this process that has been put in motion with respect to these mosquitoes. You also can't go back and reverse any of the detrimental outcomes that may be the outgrowth for humans and the environment. It's not clear exactly what might take place if humans or other animals are bitten by these particular insects when they have this particular dynamic going on. It's not clear what happens when you come in contact with even the male mosquitoes, even if they are not biting. With this particular dynamic going on. And that includes for both animals, other insects, human beings. This research points out another issue. In some instances, you may have one entity that considers something a pest. And so when you're thinking about agriculture, so a species of something may create problems in terms of crop production. But because it is a pest for one entity doesn't mean that it's a pest for everyone. And so in the case of mosquitoes even, you may have something that serves as a food source for another species. And so you have to be careful about these potential chain reactions when people try to play the role of creator or destructor. And so you also have situations where, let's say it was bees. If we were talking about bees, if you got rid of the bees, there would be a significant chain reaction that we might not even be able to anticipate. And so you may have something that is a food source for another entity, it may be a pollinator for another entity. And so we have to be very careful about this understanding or characterizing anything as a pest in the totality of circumstances. And so when you look at things more globally, what are we dealing with? Because the ecology is extremely complex, and human beings may believe they understand everything about the ecosystem, about the world, about the earth, about the sky, the water. They may believe they know everything, but they do not. And here's an indication that because there is a lack of regulation, that lawmakers, stakeholders, and civil society should join in efforts to govern this particular dynamic. And here we have another research piece talking about this gene drive population modification related to this particular lineage of mosquitoes. And interestingly, this particular mosquito has in its name crown. So, sort of a king, a royal mosquito. And in discussing this eradication agenda, it's indicated that this whole process is very mutagenic and it has a chain reaction, but it's highly efficient. And so there is this focus on efficiency versus a focus on total overall safety for the environment. Again, when you look at the circumstances related to malaria in the United States, the CDC indicates that there are only about 2,000 cases of malaria diagnosed in the United States every year, and that the vast majority of cases in the United States are from immigrants returning from countries where malaria transmission occurs. And this is mainly from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So again, this is a very odd research process. This isn't even the place where this would be the most beneficial. And so then, of course, it brings up the question of why would this venture capital dynamic in Britain focus on creating this dynamic where this is not really the problem. Okay, moving right along, we have some information from Orkin. Everyone knows who Orkin is. And so Orkin has provided information related to what eats mosquitoes. And so mosquitoes are not a pest for everyone. There are entities that have mosquitoes as their food source. And those entities include bats, birds, fish, frogs and tadpoles, turtles, dragonflies, other mosquitoes, aquatic beetles, and spiders. And so what you can see is that there needs to be more information on the impact on humans and other organisms that would have contact with these particular mosquitoes. Now it's unclear why this is the case, but with a great deal of destruction of the environment, of the earth, it seems to come along with individuals who are simply not comfortable on the earth. This place does not feel like home, and so there is a constant need to change or alter or stop some natural process on the earth. Even when you're talking about the climate evolving, if the climate is evolving in response to whatever has been going on, perhaps that's what the climate is supposed to be doing. And so human beings don't need to always be in control of every single aspect of the environment. And again, if you go back to our earlier discussion, when people are seeking to control everything outside of them, it is often because what is going on inside is out of control. And reflecting back on some of the images that have been presented throughout history of various people groups. And you see this particular people group that's being depicted. And you can easily imagine that individuals with this manifestation may not be comfortable on the earth. This may not be the comfortable space. Mosquitoes may be a pest. Bees are a pest. Flowers are a pest. The sun is the pest. The moon is a pest. The water is a pest. Everything, people are a pest. And so everything becomes a pest because some people are simply not happy in general, and then very specifically just not happy with the earth and seeking to turn the earth into something else that will perhaps make them more comfortable. And wrapping this up, we have addressed this mass extinction event that is taking place with respect to the 144,000 mosquitoes. We've talked about what that's all about, why it's all about, how it is taking place, and the implications. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.